Many of you parents out there can probably have had the same experience that I have when it comes to kids. And that is that kids are this amazing, wonderful blessing. And one of the great blessings they have is the questions they ask. Questions that you might be prepared for and you might really not be. And one of these questions that has come up recently, and it's very normal, most kids do this, they'll say, "Hey mom," or "Hey dad, when you were my age, was this hard for you? Was this easy for you? Did you enjoy this? Did you have this," right? "Were there iPads when you were 8, Dad?" Right? I mean, most of us are parents. We've fielded some sort of questions like that in our time as parents. But for me, I'm entering a really weird time as a parent. See, for those of you who know me, know that when I was a kid, I came down with leukemia. And I spent 3 years doing chemotherapy. Well, my oldest is almost the age I was when I was diagnosed, which means the entire conversation of what was it like when you were my age has a whole other sense of connotations. And because I'm a guy who's always honest, I always tell my kids I will tell you the truth, whether or not you want it or not, I get questions and I'll say, "Well, when I was that age, no, I wasn't learning to ride a bike. I was in the hospital." And so we've gotten to the point where I'm telling some of these hospital stories of what it meant to be on a kid's military ward with cancer. So my oldest comes to me a few days after hearing some of these stories and is like, "Dad, I got a question for you." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's like, "If you had a magic wand, like in Wicked, would you cast a spell so you wouldn't have gotten cancer as a kid?" Never thought I was going to get that question as an adult. I don't know why. I didn't think it's a very good question. I'll tell you, what surprised me most wasn't that she asked the question. She's an insightful kid. She's a smart kid. She's a kid who's got a really good intuition. What threw me most was my gut's answer. My gut's answer was, I would absolutely not change a thing. See, I wouldn't change a thing because, well, those 3 years of chemotherapy were horrible, awful. I still carry some literal scars from that time. I don't know who I would be if it wasn't for those 3 years. Going through that, I learned so much about myself, so much about the world, so much about God, so much about my own spirituality, goes back to that time. So much of what makes me, me, got started rolling or building back during those 3 years. I mean, heck, this is 3rd grade to 6th grade. A lot happens from 3rd grade to 6th grade. We hear about tragedy, which those 3 years were, in the first reading today, about the refiner's fire. Right? This idea that Jesus has come into the world and that part of what he does is make us stronger. Part of what faith does is to build us up. The problem is, I think we often take this in completely the wrong direction. I think a lot of Christians go out there and say, well, the reason you have faith is so that tragedy doesn't happen. I am here to tell you a really hard truth, which is that's not how it works. Faithful people every day have tragic stuff occur because that's how the world is. Your faith does not protect you from the tragedy. What your faith does is it helps you survive it. It helps you make meaning from it. It helps you come back from it better. The thing that would take any normal human and burn you up like a newspaper, leaving only gas and ash, with faith becomes the thing that takes metal and makes it stronger. A lot of folks like to think that Jesus, he tested you, or he's putting you through a trial, or he's doing this. I don't think that's how it works. I've seen too much senseless people getting all sorts of things that are really bad happening to them. And it makes no sense why Jesus would ever do that, why God would ever do that. And by the way, outside of maybe Job, though I'd argue there's a whole nother interpretation we're missing with it, you don't really find the Bible where God comes in and says, all right, so I've been looking at you, you're doing pretty good. I'm going to make your life horrible and see how you do. No, it's just not there. Now, a whole bunch of you might be saying, well, hold on, Pastor, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, it says this, it says that, it says this, it says that, those who are favored. Okay, let's take that on directly. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of like good things will happen to good people, bad things will happen to wicked, especially when you get into Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Numbers and those parts of the Bible. Let's understand what it's trying to get at. It's trying to remind you that like one aspect of faith is it does help your statistical probability out. What do I mean? Let me put it this way. Faith is like putting on your seatbelt. If you have a seatbelt and you wear it every day, every good person with an actuary table will tell you your chances of living longer goes up, right? Because there's a whole bunch of accidents out there that if you have a seatbelt on, you'll be okay. And if you don't, you're gonna die, right? Okay, we can do the same game with airbags, right? Your airbags in your cars helps prevent serious injury in all sorts of ways. And because you have airbags in your cars, a lot of people who would have died in accidents don't, right? However, you can have the best airbags in the world. You can be fully seatbelted in. And if a meteorite slams into your car, you're still toast, right? No amount of seatbelt changes that. Faith does help us live lives where it lowers our risk of bad things happening. It never eliminates it. Seatbelts help our lives where the chances of getting seriously hurt in a car is dramatically reduced. Same with airbags. Can you have all the airbags and seatbelts in the world and still have a horrifically bad accident and still get really badly hurt or die? Yeah, you don't believe me? Talk to any of the nurses or doctors in this congregation. It happens. It's horrible. It's awful. It's tragic. Well, they'll tell you, wear your seatbelt and have airbags, and tell you all sorts of bad things. If you're on a bicycle, wear your helmet, or if you're on a motorcycle, wear your helmets. Still folks who come in not alive who wore their helmets. See, well, faith can help mitigate some of the bad of the world. Sometimes a meteorite hits your car to no fault of your own. You didn't do anything wrong. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. What faith does at that moment, though, is help you figure out what to do next. Because when the hurricane has destroyed your house or the fire burnt it down or the tornado took it out, there's going to be a moment, assuming you survived that you're going to go, what do I do now? Where do I go now? What does tomorrow bring? Because I'm alive, but I don't know how together or not or broken I am or not at this moment. Most of us have lived that dark night of the soul at some point over something. It is in that moment where faith matters the most. I think it is no mistake that probably the single greatest and best known piece of the entire Bible is Psalm 23. Why? Because I walk in the shadows of the valley of death. First of all, it's worth noting the psalmist is already in a bad place, because I'm thinking the shadows of the valley of death don't sound good to me. Sound good to anyone here? I don't want to be there. His faith didn't keep him from being in those shadows. But the next line explains why he's even talking about this. Because even though he's in the valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, for thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Because when you are in the shadows of the valley of death, in whatever metaphorical or very real sense you may find yourself in, it is God's rod, it is God's staff that brings the comfort, that tells you there is nothing to fear, for with God, he will help you persevere. He will help you endure. He will help you overcome. Right? We hear that in Corinthians and Galatians. We hear that all over Paul. With God, you will persevere, you will overcome, you will make it through this. Because that is the promise of faith. on one end, yeah, faith doesn't keep you from getting hurt. But faith does give you the ability to take that moment where you feel like you are nothing but ash and gas because you've been lit on fire. And instead of falling into the wind and being whisked away by circumstance, instead of responding like the paper we're all made out of, our faith makes us metal. And as that metal is hit and beaten and hurt and put through the flames of fire, instead of vanishing, instead of cracking, it gets stronger. And when the fire inevitably goes away, when it inevitably subsides, you come out better. Able to empathize with those who've gone through what you went through. Able to see God in the darkest of moments. Able to stand with people and love them even when they don't know who they are or how to love themselves. Because you've been there. And you can give the greatest gift there is that one person give another and say, do not worry, there is hope. I have been there and I'm okay now. You can be too. Just hold fast. Now, for some of you, you may say, dude, that tragedy, it happened 40 years ago. It wiped me out. I have long ago been whisked away by the winds of change and time and whatever. Know that it is never too late. Know that with faith, with God, no matter how long or how bad or when that tragedy happened in your life, with God's love, God's care, God's strength, you too can rise like a phoenix from the ashes you thought you were. Because that is the promise of God.